This is Donna Rentelman, and I'm interviewing Mr. Malcolm Floyd of Auburndale. Mr.
Hi,
Floyd?
Donna. Well, I have quite a few things that might be of interest to us and how things were back in the days when I was a youngster.
Okay.
I was born in Brookline and lived there about a year. Then my parents decided to come out to Auburndale here, where a lot of people were coming due to the recreational facilities they had in the summertime, the canoeing in the river, and the riverside swimming pool, and all the activities and amusements at Norbigger Park. And there was a time when the air out here was considered to be very healthful. And they had several places, houses here, where people came and spent their vacations just to get the breath of the healthful air out in the Newtons and then up in Weston. One of my fondest memories of the youngster was the canoeing on the river and the park. The boating and the rowing and canoeing was very popular then. And there were, from Riverside down to Waltham, there was approximately 8 or 9 very large wooden canoe houses. And there was the Riverside boathouse, J.R. Robinson's. And Mr. Robinson had a canoe factory which was right close by, along by the rail tracks. Then there was the Commonwealth Boathouse and the Newton Boathouse, the Terminal Boathouse, then North BU, Boston University, had their own boathouse on the bend of the river. And then there was a huge one at Norbigger Park. Then there's the old Wabi War. They had a small boathouse with canoes, and they also had a place where canoes could stop and you could tie up and get ice cream and the crackers and things like that they had in those days. And then there was the Ward Avenue Boathouse. And last but not least was the famous old Nuttings. That was the dance hall up above, and it was a boathouse down below. So there was plenty of chances to go canoeing on the river.
Yes. With all the canoeing and everything, did you ever have any type of a regatta or an
May
occasion?
30th was always a big day. There was a canoe race from the Concord Street Bridge in Weston, and that went right down to Waltham. And that happened May 30th in the afternoon, and that was the biggest of the regattas. But before I was born, they used to have, around the 4th of July, a regular river pageant. The people who lived along the river would put Japanese lanterns and everything along the shore of their property. And there would be floats and so forth of all different types, different companies then would have a big float, barge-like float, and canoes were tied together and decorated and so forth. And there would be a regular parade down the river. And that was quite a gala event for quite a few years, though I did not get to see any of it. And that was the main thing. Also, they had, at Riverside, they had band concerts. And then down near Waltham, there's a little small island out in the middle of the river called Fox Island. And the band would be paddled out to the island, and there would be a band concert. And I have often heard that they said the canoes were so thick of the people just all coming around to listen to the music that you could walk from the shore of the river right across the island, across the decks, the canoes, if that could have been done. So that's how popular it was at that time. And the Metropolitan had police boats and so forth. And they also had rowboats, which the police officers went in, and they were rather novel in the fact that they could row going forward, facing forward, normally facing backward. But these boats had oars that were double jointed in a way so that they could row and still face forward and see where they're going. And they did have at one time a couple of steam launches for police boats there, but those I did not see myself. One of our best canoe manufacturers, of course, was Mr. Robinson's boathouse up there, and they made excellent canoes. But one type of canoe that they specialized in, which was beautifully done, all in mahogany, which was called the full-deck canoe. And some of them had a very special front and rear, which we call shot nose. And these were all decked in, or at least the decks might be 4 to 5 feet on each end. And they were speedy canoes. In fact, they were rather tippy. But they had nice, comfortable rugs in them and everything else. And they were practically all privately owned canoes. And some were built specially for people that Mr. Robinson did. And they'd have the boathouse flag and a little flagpole with a brass eagle on it and so forth. And they didn't lack for music, although they did not have radios in those days. They didn't lack for music. They just had a Victrola that was on a rack, and they'd place the rack across from one side, which we call gunnels, from one gunnel to the other, and they'd crank the Victrola up and face a little amplifier to wherever they wanted and put a record on and started playing, and it was very colorful to listen to them going down the river there. So
that sounds wonderful.
And as of my father went up the river before I did, and lots of times on even weekday nights he and several friends would take their canoes and they'd paddle up the river until about dark. And then they would tie their canoes together and lay down and go to sleep, and they'd drift down the river. And when they'd wake up, they might be halfway down, or they might be down a Waltham, or they might be snagged at some bushes. But then they woke up in the morning to see where they were, and they would paddle back to the boathouse and then come home, get dressed, and go to work.
Oh my goodness.
How they did that is really beyond me, because the mosquitoes at night were something terrible up there. They're unbearable. And even the cloud of the old-fashioned citronella wouldn't keep them away at times. So, and another rather colorful thing, at the end of the band concerts on Sunday afternoon, naturally the band would play the national anthem.
Was this again on the river?
This is on the river.
Okay.
And the people, instead of being polite, you always stood up when they played the national anthem. Well, they couldn't in a canoe, so they'd all put their paddles up in the air. And the minute the band started, you see everybody's paddle going up in the air as the people's way of paying their respects. And it was quite a sight. So, in Norumbega Park, that was located on the Charles River. And that was started way back in, I would judge, around the 1870s, or a little bit later, by an old sea captain. And it grew from year to year and got better and better. And as I remember it, they had quite a zoo there at that time. They had buffalo and elk, and they had all kinds of small cages of wolverines and badgers, and they had monkey cages and leopards and everything else, and even a big bear cage. And then was a huge amphitheater which had a lot of German deer in it. They were beautiful animals. Then, of course, there was all the merry-go-round rides and the Ferris wheels and a whole assortment of different rides and so forth. This particular merry-go-round had animals on it, to me, were the most beautiful ones I've ever seen. They were beautifully carved. And after the park was sold and the animals were taken off the merry-go-round and so forth, I happened to read in the paper that these animals, the horses and the lions and the tigers and giraffes and so forth, had been carved by old wood carvers back in Germany way in the 1880s. And they were going way back then as much as $2,000 and $3,000 a piece for these animals because they were so beautiful.
Did many of the people of Auburndale purchase them?
No, they didn't. Yeah, no, they went to museums. There's a place up in Vermont, I forget the name of it now. It's a great big museum up there. It has a couple of them up there. I almost recognized them by sight when I saw them. And the boathouses stayed open usually as a rule until midnight every night. And let's see. And that was of quite some interest to show the activity that was on the river. It was a bit before my time, too, was that they had two steamboats, 75-foot paddle wheel, side wheeler steamboats plying on the river. And one of them was docked in Waltham, and one of them had a berth up in Norumbega Park. And they ran all summer on a daily schedule back and forth between Norumbega and Waltham. And that was quite a ride to go on the river there. I used to do a lot of errands for my family uptown, and the stores, of course, were different then. When you went into a store for groceries and so forth, you went up to the counter, and a man on the other side, usually the store owner or his helper, would wait on you. And you'd either give him the list of things your mother wanted or read it off, and he'd get them and put them down. And if you wanted peanut butter, you usually bought it by at least a half pound or a pound or so forth. And he would take a great big wooden paddle and stick it into a great big tub and put it on a piece of orange wax paper on the scales and weigh it off and then wrap it up. And that's the way you brought home your peanut butter.
Not like Jif.
No. And milk always came in bottles at that time. There was milk bottles, and there was no cartons or anything at that time. And so forth. And the ladies those days really had to work when they bought a turkey or chickens and so forth. Lots of times they had to spend a half hour or more with the turkey or the chicken and so forth, picking out the pin feathers. They were little tiny feathers, and if you didn't get them out, they tasted something terrible, but they had to be all picked out. And lots of times they came from the butcher market with the heads and the feet on, and those had to be taken off. So, and the drugstores in those days had the old soda fountains. You get all sundaes and sodas and fraps and so forth. And every drugstore had one. And it was always a treat on a Saturday night and Friday night or something to walk down to the drugstore to get a soda. So, in Auburndale, they had about 6 horses down there, and I used to go down and watch the coal men throw the coal onto the carts there, and then they'd drive up to a big platform where they'd weigh the wagon and so forth, and then send the cart would be hauled up to wherever they're delivering coal to. And the coal carts had a big long metal chute on one side of it, and they'd put that down the cellar window into your coal bin. And then the poor coal men would have to take these great big leather bags that they had, they were called coal hods, and fill them up, and then pick up these heavy leather bags and carry them to that chute and dump the coal down the chute and into your coal bin. And of course, we had the iceman. When you wanted ice, this is before the refrigerator days, the iceman would come around with his horse and wagon every day. And you were given a car that was it was oblong, but it was about a foot high, so forth. And on one side there would be, one side would have a large number 25, and then another one would have a large number 50, and then the next side would be 75, then 100. And if you wanted, say, 50 pounds of ice, you put the card up in your window with the 50 up. And as the iceman came down the street in his wagon, why, he'd see that card in the window, and he would haul out a piece of ice that was about 50 pounds and chip it down to size, and then put the big tongs and throw it over his shoulder and carry the ice up into your refrigerator. And of course, we kids always was a big treat to get out the ice bin and get a few chips of ice to put in your mouth there. And then also we had the ragmen came around. They came around with their horse and wagon too, and they bought rags. They were mostly Jewish men, but they bought all kinds of rags from you, and that was particularly when they used rags to make paper with. And the milkman too, he came around with a horse and wagon and so forth, and brought you your milk. And also we had vegetable and fruit peddlers, and I can remember them with horse and wagons, and also with the old Model T Fords. And they usually came from up in Weston. They were farmers from Weston, and they came down usually in the afternoon, and you bought a lot of your groceries and your vegetables and fruit from them. And also, Commonwealth Avenue here was divided, and the trolleys used to go back and forth up to Lake Street there. And in the spring, lots of Italian people would come out from Boston and walk along this grass plot and pick up dandelions, just dig them out of the ground and take them home and eat them. In fact, I remember them coming up on our front lawn here and not asking you really, but just digging up the dandelions, and you didn't say anything. And they go along up the street to somebody else's. Yeah.
Did you ever try this delicacy?
Yes, oh, I love them. They're good for you.
How do you cook
They're very
them?
rich in iron. You boil them or steam them. You have to be cleaned off, get all the sand out of them. But they're bitter. But if you like the taste of them, and you see they're very rich in iron, they're very good for you. You can get them in stores now, but then also we had the balloon and the pinwheel man. And this was the balloon man and pinwheel man, and they had the little birds in the string and sticks and so forth. They would come around every spring also, and they had a special little whistle, and you always knew that whistle when you heard him, when all the kids would go screaming to their mothers for a dime or something so that you go out and get a balloon. And the organ grinders, they came around. They're disappeared now, and they'd stop in front of your house and start playing their organ. It was on a pedestal, and a lot of them had the little monkeys with a little cap on them and so forth. And also there were the men who came around with knife sharpeners. And they did a beautiful job. Everybody, all the ladies would come out of the house and bring their knives to him, and they'd sharpen them for 10 cents. He'd sharpen them for 10 cents a piece or something like that. And and also in the spring, why, I also remember the bean blowers. This was for the kids. And they did away with those after a while. They were too dangerous. They were long metal tubes. They were about the thickness of these here, and about a foot long.
About the size of a
Yes.
ballpoint pen,
Yes.
that thickness.
Yeah. And you go up and buy a small bag of split peas from the grocer. Then you put those things in your some kids could put a handful in their mouth and blow them. But kids began to get their eyes put out with them, and or they'd swallow those things like that, or they get that metal bean blower jammed up in their mouth or something, and they finally went out of style. And also, too, each spring we had the gypsies going through town. They came through with horse and wagons and old lumbering Model T Fords, and I can remember the whole line of them stopped up in Auburndale, and my mother saying, "Don't you dare go near them, they'll kidnap you and take you away." They were dirtiest looking bunch of people I ever saw.
What did they do when they came?
But they just went, I don't know where they went or where they came from or where they were going, but I can still remember those poor beaten them horses and the wagons covered with mud and everything. The roads in those days, too many of them were paved, and they were still mud holes. And after heavy rain, even cars and everything would bog right down in them. So then we had the steam trains, and they were really fascinating. They were the most fascinating things to watch. All the mechanism and the drive rods and so forth, and the sound of them and their steam whistles was really fascinating. And there was a regular service between Riverside and Boston. Went from Riverside all through the Newtons into Alston and Brighton and Huntington Avenue right into Boston. And all the businessmen took those trains back and forth to work in Boston each day. And between 7:30 and about 9:30 in the morning, you could get a train into Boston every 20 minutes. And it was a luxury. All you'd do is get a newspaper for 2 cents, and just think about nothing, just read and ride until you got into town.
How much did it cost to take the train?
There was 15 cents a ride, as I remember, but gradually the price went up and so forth. You'd get a special rate if you bought a book of tickets, and which a lot of men did, and it'd give you a better rate that way. But of course, it was the freight trains, and some of those engines were huge. You stand down by the tracks, and when those great big steam engines went over it, you could feel the ground shake underneath you. Oh, they were tremendous.
Jeez.
Oh, they were tremendous things. And you could always tell when in Alston for years they had the Brighton stockyards in Brighton, in Boston. They had stockyards. Must have been a half a mile on either side of the tracks of pens, cattle pens. And they had the abattoir there. And all these trains, long trains, would be bringing pigs and cows and things in on the trains to the Brighton stockyards. And you could always tell when the cattle train went through by you could smell the Easton's pie. But the one drawback, other than the clouds of smoke and the dirt that they gave off, was cinders. And you never knew when you was going to get a cinder in your eye, 'cause you can't see it. A train might go through, and an hour later you might be walking uptown or something, and all of a sudden you get a little cinder in your eye. Where it came from or not, but it was a little tiny, minute particles from this train smoke that was still floating in the air. And one of those things in your eye felt like a grain of sand. And we as kids used to go right to the druggist and tell him you had a cinder in your eye, and he'd go get a toothpick or a matchstick and put a piece of cotton around it and lick it. You wet the cotton, and they'd roll your eyelid back and find it. And usually they would get it and take it right up on this piece of wet cotton, and they'd show it to you. And it was so small you could hardly see it. It would be a little tiny thing, it was the tiniest dot. However, they were very irritating, and if you couldn't get them out, they were as bad as a toothache. So, at night, it was back in those days, and I'm speaking about the early 20s, it was very, very quiet. And summer nights, our family used to sleep out on the porch all night long, and hot nights would be just as comfortable as could be. And we had several farms in Auburndale at that time. And a lot of people used to keep hens. And just at the crack of dawn, or even before dawn, you'd hear the roosters of these different places crowing away. And then at 7 o'clock, the old Waltham Watch Factory steam whistle would go off. And when that went off, it meant that the workers had just a few more minutes to get into work, or they were late. That's how they told them. But we had 2 farms, Carey's farm, and then we had another a dairy farm, Cunningham's farm there, and lots of people down in this area along the river had a cow or two. It wasn't a farm, but they had a small shack, and they kept a cow or two in there. And winters, I remember them primarily as the snow starting around Thanksgiving, and even skating starting about Thanksgiving. And as I remember winters then, there was snow on the ground constantly between this Thanksgiving time right up until March. I can remember at the end of March skating down in the river, and at least 8 or 9 inches of snow still in the ground.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, we don't have those anymore.
Yeah. And one of the fun things of winter was catching rides on the pungs, the horse-drawn pungs, the sleighs. They were easy to do because all you had to do was see one going along and then run after it and just step on one of the runners and hold on to the sides of the pung and get a ride. However, if the driver didn't like the kids on or didn't want you on, you'd see him look back at you and then all of a sudden reach over and he'd get his whip and he'd take a pass at you with his whip and you get out of the way fast.
I bet.
And in the summertime too, I remember seeing a couple of runaway horses too. They were usually horses that had been under wagons and so forth, and they were stopped downtown where the owner got out. But sometimes a big piece of newspaper or something, the wind would blow it, and it would come skittering along towards them, and the horse would shy, and they'd panic very easy. And they'd pull and break away and start running down the street with nobody in it, and usually the owner running down after him, swearing his head off. Of course, you couldn't catch him. But every now and then there would be a runaway going down through town there.
Jeez.
As a rule, they had each carriage had a heavy weight, or it might have weighed 10 or 15 pounds. And he'd take that out of the carriage, and there was a strap attached to it. And he'd hook that strap to the bridle of the horse. And usually that would hold him. Normally the horse wouldn't try to get away or anything. And they tethered the horse that way, or sometimes they'd tie him to something. But sometimes the horses would just break away of that. They see something would shy them. And also kids did a lot of coasting. Kids, every time you'd see a kid in the wintertime, he'd be towing a sled behind them. And there was not the traffic problem then, and you could go up any one of the big hills here with and slide down, have a nice, wonderful slide, because the streets were always covered with snow anyways. And trolley cars, they were another memory, electric trolley cars. And you could go from Auburndale into Boston for 10 cents. And that was always a nice ride, and particularly in the summer when they got the open trolleys out. They were all open. They were covered in the top, of course, and so forth. But you get all that nice cool breeze on you. And trolleys went everywhere, from one town to another. You could go practically anywhere, just like you can with a bus on the old trolley cars.
Did they carry you into Boston as well?
Yes, yeah.
And,
You'd go from here. They started way down. That started way down by where the old where the Marriott Hotel is here now, down the end of Concord Avenue, and go into Lake Street, down by your place. And at the bottom of the hill, there was a great big shack, which there were double tracks, and the cars from Auburndale, he would come down, and then you get off in the shack, so it was rain, you wouldn't bother, and get into it, go right around and go into another car. It was like that, and go right into Boston. You get a transfer, and go right into Boston. It's going to cost us a dime. And let's see. As a rule, on Sundays, most people the only amusement was, especially in the fall and the spring, before the park opened and so forth, people went out for walks or hikes. See parents with a whole bunch of kids out and so forth. They go walking up through Western, through the woods. It was more darn fun. When you got home, you were really tired. You didn't have any energy to go out and get into trouble or anything. You were ready for supper in bed. But it wasn't hard to build up there like it was now. So, and of odd things, as I remember, were the old steamrollers. They were huge things. They were fascinating. Things would come up the road after the city usually owned steamrollers, and they were ones that after the tar was put down, they'd run these huge things over, to flatten it out. But they were really true rollers. They had huge two back wheels and a big boiler and a big smokestack and a great big canopy over them and so forth. And they were steered by chains on either side to steer the roller. And the man had a crank like that. If you wanted to go this way, he'd crank it this way, and the chains would pull this way. And they didn't go more than 5 or 6 miles an hour anyways, and it was quite a sight to see those things lumbering up the street, and of course the stones and things crunching underneath them. And we had a blacksmith shop in town, McNeil's blacksmith shop, and I can remember going down there when I was a kid. Every now and then they'd let us in, but if there were a lot of horses, the blacksmiths would come out and chase us out of the place. But when we did get in, we would have to stand up against the wall there, and we'd watch the blacksmith shoe the big city horses and the carriage horses and so forth. And he had a row of different shoes that were different sizes. And when the horse came in, they'd tether the horse to the wall by the bridle there, and he'd pick up the blacksmith would take his shoe, which he thought was the right size, and he'd pick up the horse's hoof, back up and pick up the horse's hoof right between his legs there, and put the shoe on to see how it fitted. And if it didn't fit right, why, he'd start up his anvil and get it red hot, and he'd start tapping it down to size. Then also he'd take this great big coarse file, and he had a great big, had to have leather, very heavy leather apron. And he'd taken his file, all the dead, just like your nails, off the horse's hoof. And smooth it all up like that, and then he'd take and the shoe, and he'd fit it, and if it didn't fit right, he'd start the blowers again, pumping and get the shoe hot again, and then shape it some more, and then with great big tongs he'd dip it in the water, and the steam would come out. Then he'd take it over to the horse, and after it fitted, why, they had nails and a big hammer, and he'd hold the shoe on, and the shoe had nail holes every maybe inch and a half right around the circle there, and he'd put nails through those holes, and that held the shoe on. He'd put nails right through the horse's hoof. And when he usually did it so he'd have just a little bit come through, and then he'd take the hammer and bend it over so the nails couldn't pull out.
Oh, wow.
And then after the job was done, well, he had a can of black paint, and he'd paint the horse's hoof. He dressed him all up, all in shiny, nice, beautiful.
I didn't realize they did that.
Well, some horses didn't like it. Some didn't bother them at all. The lazy old horses, sometimes they'd go to sleep. But other ones, they'd come around, they'd try to bite the blacksmith and walk in there while he was doing, or they'd kick, and it would be quite a sight. Some blacksmiths' shops had a great big overhead, was like a very heavy canvas. And if they had a very unruly horse, they wouldn't let anybody shoe him. And they'd put this on, it would wrap right around the horse, and they'd put it underneath him, and then they'd pull it up with pulleys so the horse was just a little bit off the ground, and he couldn't get any purchase to kick or anything.
Oh, I see. So it
You
kind of
lifted him up
under the horse's belly,
and they'd lift him up, and he couldn't kick,
geez.
or not as hard, but you didn't get too many that way. So. And now let's see. My house here is is at least 100 years old. And although my deeds, we have no date on it, one of my little cousins came, or several of them one day, and they peeled off the dining room paper, a great big hunk of it. And I can remember my mother being mad as the dickens. But underneath that paper on the wall was a date, 18-something, and there was a funny face painted and so forth, and the date on that wall, which gave me gave my mother and my father something to go by at the age of this house. But this house was built by whom we call Granddaddy Fisk. He was an old Civil War veteran. He had a long beard. And right next to mine, his house was one of these huge pre-Civil War houses, great big one, all beautiful oak interior.
Is that still there?
No, dear. It's where this house, this white one, and the next one was.
Oh, I see.
We used to play football out here. There was so much room. This fence wasn't here or anything. That fence wasn't. I could look right down there. It was all open field. And there's a gray house down on the corner of the street. You can't see it now, which was the barn. This was all level here. And the back road to the carriage road, when this level part came here, and there's a knoll out there where the barn backed up to. And
wow.
It was the barn to that house. But the house was monstrous, but it was beautiful inside. But however, evidently Granddaddy Fisk's wife didn't want to live in such a big house, and so he built this one. He evidently didn't consult her or anything, but he went and built it. And after it was all finished, he went to his wife and said, "Your house is ready, and I want you to come over and look at it and see how you like it." And so she got her things on and walked out the back door and went across this backyard here, came into the house. She looked all around and went upstairs and looked all around and came out. And when she They came out the back door. She turned to him and said, "I'll never step foot in this house again." And she went back to her house that she was originally in, walked back. So Granddaddy had to sell it. And it was bought by people called the Allens first, and then an artist bought it, and he used this dining room as a studio. Then Daddy saw it, and my mother saw it around 1926, I think, and they bought it. And we had a full acre of land at that time, and he paid only $11,500 for it. And now I'd hate to tell you what my assessment is on my real estate taxes, but that's the story of this house, and this house is still up in the attic where the beams, huge beams, go together. They're not joined by nails. They've got holes with wooden pegs through them. We call tree nails or trunnels. And it's to hold the beams together. There'd be holes drilled in pegs of wood about the thickness of a broomstick.
Wow.
And driven right in there, and it holds them together. I've got it.
That's incredible.
Yes, it really is. So that's the story on the house.
I was wondering,
as I said, I was born in Brookline in 1914, and I lived. My father and mother lived with his father and mother in Brookline on Beacon Street for about a year. And in 1915 they came out here to Auburndale. And of course the change is tremendous. At that time, as I remembered, Auburndale was just another little lazy, quiet country town with a horse-drawn fire station in it, and a block of stores, and some trolleys going through, and all the main streets had beautiful elm trees over in the summertime, the shadows of the trees, and it was just as nice and quiet as could be. It really was lovely. Now at night you can't sleep out there, stay out, the traffic is terrible.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
No, dear, I'm an only child. But I wasn't spoiled. My father didn't spoil me. If he did anything wrong, he'd take me by the ear right into the house. That's the way they grabbed you. You came along, too. They took you by the lobe of the ear and lifted, boy. You went on your tiptoes and right into the house. And I did anything wrong, I'd get a smacking for it. I can remember that bulkhead being open and my father sitting down there and taking me across his knees and getting me one good whack. If you wanted to make it bad, I had to take my pants down, and he had a shingle.
A shingle?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
And we sat. My father and mother had a maid, and we had all our meals in the dining room there, and the maid waited on us, did all the cooking and so forth. But you could get one for $13.50 a week.
Oh,
that's all it was. And she came in every day and worked. And we had some very nice ones.
What did your dad do?
My father was the general manager of the New England division for the Fred Rooping Leather Company. They were a big leather company out in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And Boston was very noted here for both their leather districts and their wool districts. And down on South Street in that area was a huge leather district. And they sold leather mostly for shoes. Got all these big shoe factories in Brockton and Lawrence and so forth. And he was New England manager for that.
Oh, wow. And did he get to choose where he wanted to live here? Or was he...
No, he just bought it. And there are 5 generations of my family in this house since we've lived here. From my grandmother to my grandchildren, there have been 5 generations. And I've lived in this house for a good 55 years myself. And if I can have it, I won't leave it myself. It's one of those rare things, but I wouldn't leave this house. And it's place here if I like depended on. So
your grandmother lived here with you?
She came. Well, she lived with my father and mother because her husband had died. And back in those old days too, everybody knew everybody else. People did not move around like they do now. People would come and live here, and they'd live here years and years, and everybody knew everybody else in the street. And from one end of the street to the other. And they'd have a lot of supper parties together. In the summertime, they'd have outdoor, similar to our cookouts, tables set up, and you bring food out, and have a nice time. In the wintertime, they'd have bridge games. And we had a club in the Auburndale, up here in Auburndale, and they had dancing twice a month and so forth.
Was that the Auburndale Club?
It's the Auburndale Club. It's now a theater. It's at Turtle Lane Theater.
Oh.
And but that's what it was. My father was president of it years ago.
Oh.
And it was wonderful. It was unique. They had bowling up there. The Honeywell had a club down in Newton, and there used to be neighborhood clubs in West Newton and Warburn, but they are getting to be a thing of the past because the mode of what people do has changed. But you got to know everybody, and they had theater groups and so forth. And what else was I going to say? Our Auburndale Club had dances. Sometimes we'd have them twice a month up in the hall there, and they had a theater group which people who liked to would put on plays and so forth, and they had bowling and everything else.
Did they have holiday celebrations at the Auburndale Club?
Yes, Christmas and New Year's Eve were always formal. You went there, you went formal. Evening gowns, it was nice, men in their tuxedos.
Do you remember your parents going? Or did you yourself go?
I did myself. I was a member there for years and years, and I met some of the nicest people. We had members that came as far as from Wakefield just to come here. Yes, they came. Several of our presidents who lived in Brookline. And they came from all parts of Newton and everything else. You got to know everybody, and it was marvelous.
Is that where you met your wife?
No, I went to school with her. I went since we were 14 years old, and my wife and I went all through Newton schools, and all my children went through Newton schools. So that's it. Neighborhoods neighborhoods in those days were good. People kept their property up. They mowed their lawns, they trimmed their bushes, and you did not work on Sunday, period. If you were seen out working Sunday, other than something you had to do like sifting ashes or bringing ashes out from the cellar from your coal bins and so forth from your furnace, well, you were criticized. Sunday was a day of rest, that's right.
Is the church group very important?
Yes, the church groups were very strong in those days, and it was a little bit biased. I can remember my parents bags, big bandana handkerchiefs over their noses, counter the dust, and they'd throw the dirt out the window. Then a couple more men out there would take and throw the dirt onto the cart, and the horse would haul it off, and another one would come up and take his place. And they did the work themselves, and things like that. Now it was unthinkable to do anything like that. You'd hire a contractor to do it. But when they want something done, the men pitched in and did it all by themselves, and the ladies would have supper ready some nights, and for them, and it was quite an event.
Wow.
So
Did you ever participate in the LaSalle Music Festival?
no,
They had?
no. LaSalle was a very influential college back those days, and I can remember they had quite a riding stable. You could go from Auburndale here up through bridle paths and these big estates. They would allow the LaSalle horses to go through their bridle paths. And on weekends, why LaSalle would rent their horses, saddle horses, to people that they knew and so forth. And my dad would take me and a couple of other people, and we'd go up and rent some horses and ride out of LaSalle through the yards and up round by the Charles River, up through Riverside, and you'd ride up all through Weston and Wells. You wouldn't see a house. There's nothing up there. All woods, beautiful woods, and all through the paths, and you spend all afternoon riding and come back for a couple of dollars.
Wow.
And it was quite a thing. Oh, I used to be quite a horseback ride. I loved it.
That sounds wonderful. Did you go to movies for entertainment?
Yes,
ever?
they had movies. They had movies ever since I could remember. And at our Auburndale club, I can remember the first movies that came in, and they were the old silent pictures. And the sound accompaniment was a lady or a man playing the piano. And that person would play the piano constantly for 2.5 hours. And of course, those days, the cowboy pictures and the pioneer pictures and Wild West and the Robin Hood pictures were the popular things. And if there was a cowboy and Indian picture coming up there, why all the kids, Friday nights would be reserved for the older people. And they would go up Friday nights. And then Saturday afternoons, the kids could come in. And it was a madhouse. They'd be in there from everywhere. Yeah. And to see the silent movies. And then finally sound came in, and they still had them for a while, but later on they just petered out. They didn't pay, so we didn't have them anymore. Yeah.
How much did it cost you to go?
15 cents.
Really?
It was 15 cents, yeah.
Did you get to know the piano player as well?
Oh, yeah. I remember Nettie Perkins. She used to live in town. She'd come and she'd pound away in that piano. When the horses were, cowboys were chasing Indians or something, she'd banging away, make it sound as exciting. They'd look up at the screen, and then it was a love scene, and it would, the piano playing would come down or something romantic, and she'd have to play by heart, and they'd do it, by golly.
That's great.
Yes, it was.
That's really neat. You said that you had worked as a lithographic artist in Boston.
I worked with the Rustcraft Publishing Company. They made the old Rustcraft greeting cards, and they were famous for many, many years, the two Rust brothers. And I worked as a lithographic artist for them. It was one of these deals where you became a journeyman lithographer. No, you became an apprentice, and it took 4 years to learn this particular trade before you could become a journeyman, which means you were taught me in there. Mm-hmm. And I did photo retouching and so forth, and color correction on the camera plates, and dot etching with cyanide. That's why it paid so well. Cyanide was deadly. You get a drop of that in your tongue and you were gone.
Did they have any type of protective equipment for that?
No, you were just darn careful. They had these big frosted screens with water coming down, and you did a little thing of cyanide with a brush. And if you wanted to etch the dots down, everything was done by dots. You put the cyanide on it, and to stop the work of the cyanide from eating the dots away, you'd let the water come, and you'd squeegee it back and just etch it down a little bit smoother, and then let it come. You'd press the pedal, and the water would come down like that. And it was an art to do that, because the size dot that you made determined the amount of color. was going. It was a combination of yellow, blue, red, and black.
Mhm.
And you had those 4 colors on little dots, and they made up blues and purples and browns and everything else. It was quite a thing to do that.
Did you ever keep samples of your work?
Oh, I had
About-
some, but finally I used to have them. I throw them all out
No
now.
longer.
Yes. Yeah.
How long did you work for them?
I worked for Russ Craft 24 years for
Mhm.
them, yeah. Yeah.
And then did they go out of business or move?
They went
or-
out of business. They moved from Harrison Avenue. They were in the old Jane's Drug Building in Harrison Avenue, South Boston. Oh, what a tough place that was. But they had all the big printing presses in there, and all, and the artists were in there, and the people who made up the verses, and their offices and everything, and they did well for years. Then they moved out to Dedham. The building is still there in Dedham, beautiful big building. But they finally,
They folded.
one of the Russ brothers died, and some other company from New York bought them up, kept the name, but they just went.
Between what years did you work there?
1930, let's say about 1937 to 1960 or something like that. Roughly, it's quite
That's a
while.
long time.
Yes, it was a long time. Yeah.
But you got work during the Depression.
No, I was in high school during the Depression. I was one of the graduating classes of 1935 and 36 during the Depression. They let us know we were the unwanted generation. No jobs for us. Absolutely no jobs. And
So coming out of high school, what did you do before you worked for them?
Oh, I worked for Filene's as well. I worked down here at the gas station, and then I worked in the lumber yard, which was right next door where the coal yard used to be. Then I graduated and worked in town in Filene's for $14 a week. And then I worked for a paint and varnish company over in Dorchester. And then finally I got this job with Russ Craft.
That must have been really enjoyable work.
Well, some of it was. The paint and varnish company wasn't too good. That was a tough part of town in Dorchester, too.
I'm sure you handled yourself fine.
Oh, yes.
When the company went out of business or moved, were you offered work elsewhere through the union?
Well, the union said anybody who wants a good job has got to back up and go to Detroit, out in Detroit and Chicago and even out west. And New York City and around there and these other big cities was getting in these electronic scanners, which was doing our work by hand, manual work, but electronically. And sooner or later we knew that they'd go out west with those things too, so I just get out of it entirely.
Would you have left Auburndale?
No,
anyway?
no, I wouldn't have. No, I wouldn't have left it. I would have found something. Well, I did find something. I worked up at Newton Hospital as an X-ray orderly for several weeks, and finally got a job with General Radio up in West Concord. It's a big electronics company up there. And I was with them in quality control for 10 years. And after that, I worked for my brother-in-law for about 10 or 12 years. It was the Waltham Perry Pontiac and Cadillac Company in Waltham. So, and after that, here we are.
Were you affected by World War II at all here in Auburndale, as far as
I wasn't home. I
service?
was away for 5 years, during the war. I was way down in Texas and then out in California, expecting to go out in the Pacific or up into Alaska, and the next thing I knew was we were putting a train and we were coming right back to the East Coast and went right over to Italy. And we landed in Italy and went right up to the Austrian border.
Wow.
So I didn't see much of home for 5 years.
When did you go in?
I joined the old First Corps of Cadets in Boston. They have an armory right across from Payne's Furniture Store. It's an old castle-like thing. I joined them, and they were at the time National Guard. And one of the people who worked at Ruscraft was an officer there, and he says, play it smart. Join up now, and then get out before anything starts. So I joined,
Little did
and
you
I didn't
know.
get out. I was taken for 5 more years.
Oh.
So that was it.
Were you married at that time?
No, I didn't get married until the war started, and I had to come back from Texas to get married. And it was one of these things where you had about 2 days up at home, 2 or 3 days, whirlwind honeymoon in New York, and then back here, and then you say all the goodbyes. They were terrible. You never knew whether you were going to come back alive to see, or what you'd be like if you did come back. And they were terrible, absolutely heartrending.
Oh, it must have been. When you left, did your wife stay here
Yeah,
in,
she
in
lived
your family
yes,
home?
she lived right here with my father and mother. And when my first, she came down to Texas a couple of times to see me, and she came way up to California, and getting a ride in the trains, they were so, everybody was moving around. It was an ordeal. But she came out, and so forth. And now I remember getting a letter, giving me a letter up in Italy, and the mail was delivered at night because it had to be. The Germans wouldn't get any wind of it. When my first child was born, the guy handed me the letter. I reached up for it out of my pit I was in there, dug into, and getting it, and reading it by a little candlelight there, so forth.
Then did you have to be quiet about it anyway?
Oh, well.
Or did you celebrate?
No, nothing we could do. We weren't much more to do when we celebrated.
So between what years were you in the service?
Between 1938 and 1945. Yeah.
I see. And was it during that time, while you were in the service, did Russ Craft hold your position?
Yes. Well, it was mandatory. Anybody who volunteered for service, always drafted, the company that they left was obliged by law to take that person back. In other words, the government saw that you didn't leave your job when you went out to serve the country.
Oh, that's...
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
That was it.
Would you say that your life in Auburndale focused mostly around your family or the neighborhood or the clubs?
The neighborhood.
The neighborhood?
Yes, yeah. Well, the neighborhood and of Newton, too. When I was in junior high and high schools, why, they had dancing classes and so forth. Mr. Champagne, a very nice gentleman, had dancing classes at we had the McBraven Country Club, and they had dancing classes at Woburn Country Club and the West Newton one. And when I say classes, they were regular and nice dances where you dressed up and you wore white gloves so that you wouldn't get your lady, whoever you danced, was soiled in any way. You wore white gloves.
Goodness.
And the first of they got to be, after a while, they were called assemblies. And you went, in the first half hour, they showed you different dance steps. And after that, with a regular orchestra and everything, well, you had a nice dance to 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. And they were served refreshments and ice cream and cookies and so forth. And it was very, very nice. And the high school had their dance groups, the High Y and the Sigma Phi group. and they'd have dances at the Women's Club and Longwood Towers and places like that. It was quite a thing.
So did all the children from your neighborhood go to the same school?
Yes, they went
Was
to
there
same
was
thing.
there only one school, or were there?
No, there was the Burr School on this side of the tracks and the Williams School on the other side.
So everyone from here went to the Burr School?
Yes. Well, I was from here, but I went to the Williams School.
Oh, you
My
did?
mother got me into the Williams School because that was, at that time, the proper school to go to. All the
I
better
see.
children were in the Williams School.
And was the Williams School for kindergarten onwards?
Yes, they went from kindergarten on to the 6th grade, as a rule.
Mhm.
And then, as a rule, there was no, junior high school business didn't start, as I can remember, till 1927,
Mhm.
where they had 8th and 9th and 10th grades. 7th,
I
8th,
see.
and 9th, and 10th grades.
Did you continue your education at the Newton High School? Or?
Well, I went through Newton High, and then I went for 2 years to Northeastern,
Mhm.
the university there. And that was that.
Did your children have about the same experience with the neighborhood when they were growing up?
Yes,
in the
they did.
schools?
They did. As it was gradually changing, but they had about the same experience. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
How is your neighborhood today? Has it changed much?
Yes, I don't know anybody. I know very few people in the street. These people here and a few next door and across the street, but the rest is coming and going all the time.
Mhm.
And you just don't know anybody. People down the street, I don't know who they are. If I see them walking up, you nod and say hi, but I have no idea where they live or anything else.
I drove down today and I noticed you have a nice little circle
Oh, right down there?
at the end.
Yeah,
there.
that's the park. We used to play football out there.
That's-
We used to play football out there and baseball for years.
That must have been nice
It
for
was
gatherings.
nice. Well, we made so much noise after a while that people had bushes planted in the middle, and it took up the room, so you couldn't play there anymore. Oh yes, we used to climb every one of those trees. I'd been up the top of every one of those trees, and a lot of them are gone.
Do you ever keep in touch with any of the people you met?
No, they're all gone. My age, half of them died. No, I never have told the truth.
No,
Yeah, it's been...
that's too bad. Do you have anything that really, any changes that really strike you?
Well, the biggest change that strikes me is the traffic going through town and the traffic on my street. Trucks, big trucks go up the street and rumble and banging away, and it's sort of a cutoff here. People come down this street, commuters going back and forth, Boston and Western and so forth. They cut off something, a lot of lights and something by coming down my street. Around 5 o'clock, it is something.
So Auburndale has become much more a part of Boston than a
Yes,
retreat
yeah,
from it.
yeah, that's right. It has, dear. Yeah, that's right. So,
Okay.
well, yes, discipline was much more prevalent and stronger when I was a kid. If any young man went out and got in trouble on the street or anything, or did something was wrong with his neighbors, usually after the police had gotten through with him, if anything was that bad, why, he went home, then the father would take care of him. And they'd get a good whacking, and they wouldn't do that again. Or if they did, they knew they were going to be in trouble with their parents. And if they were bad in school and so forth, when I was really little, the teachers would whack you with a ruler. and they wouldn't take any guff. And then they'd tell your mother or your father, and then when you got home, you got to face your mother and father, and you'd get it from them too. They'd back up the teachers. And there was very little trouble in school. There was no drinking, there was no dope, there was no smoking. If you swore, the teacher could put salt in your, or soap in your tongue. And that was a and you went home and you'd tell your mother and father what the teacher did to you. They all see your mother and father say it's good enough for you. But don't swear, say hell or damn again. That's what it amounted to. Yes.
You had mentioned last time we talked that one of your daughters had the same first grade teacher.
Yes, my oldest daughter had the same first grade teacher that I did. It was the first grade teacher's last year, but she did have and it was quite an unusual thing.
What school was that at?
This was up at the Burr School here in Auburndale. The Burr School's been since taken down. So, all right, dear.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Floyd, for your time.
Pleasure, dear. I'm glad I could help you. Indeed, you've done a good job. So forth. Yeah.